Chapter 47 of This Country of Ours. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. This Country of Ours by H.E. Marshall. Chapter 47. The Mississippi Bubble. Being thus encroached upon by the British, the French became more determined to shut them out from the South. Already 12 years after La Salle's death, another attempt had been made to found a town at the mouth of the Mississippi, and this time the attempt was successful. This time the expedition was led by Pierre Le Moyne, Sieur d'Iberville. In 1698, with 2 ships, he sailed out from France and, after some trouble, found the mouth of the Mississippi. He did not, however, build his fort here, but on the coast of what is now the state of Mississippi. Then, leaving one of his officers and his brother in command, he sailed home again to France. While d'Iberville was away, his brother Bienville started on an expedition to explore the Mississippi. And soon he discovered that the French had taken possession none too soon, for not far from where New Orleans now stands he fell in with a British ship. On board were a lot of French Huguenot families who had come to found a settlement on the Mississippi. Bienville talked to the captain, who told him that this was one of 3 ships sent out from England by a company formed of Huguenots and Englishmen who intended to found a colony on the Mississippi. They were not sure, however, whether they were on the Mississippi or not. Bienville at once assured them that they were not, but were instead on a river which belonged to Louis of France, where already the French had several settlements. The British captain believed what he was told, and, much to the Frenchman's delight, turned back. Just at the spot where this took place the river makes a bed, and because of this it was given the name of English Bend, by which name it is known to this day. D'Iberville only stayed long enough in France to gather more colonists, and returned at once to Louisiana, where he founded 2 more towns along the coast. But the colonists sent out by Louis were of the lowest. Many of them were little more than rogues and vagabonds. The mere offscourings of the towns, they were idle and extravagant, and the colony did not prosper. Instead of putting gold into Louis's pockets, as he had hoped, he had constantly to pour it out to maintain the colony. Of that Louis soon grew tired. Besides this, he wanted all the money he could gather to carry on the war, Queen Anne's War, which was still raging. So, in 1712, he handed Louisiana over to a wealthy merchant named Crozat to make what he could out of it. Such great power was given to this merchant that he was little less than a king. He had every monopoly. Nobody in the colony could buy or sell the smallest thing without his permission, and everyone had to work for him and not for themselves. But the people were by no means willing workers. They were, said one of their priests, nearly all drunkards, gamblers, blasphemers, and foes of everything that was good, and when they found that they are expected to work merely to put money into the proprietor's pocket, they would not work at all. So, very soon, Crozat found he could make nothing out of the colony. And after some vain efforts to make it pay, he gave up his charter, and Louisiana once more became a royal possession. Meanwhile, France itself was in sore straits for money. Louis XIV, that magnificent and extravagant monarch, had died, and left his country beggared and in want. The Duke of Orleans now ruled as regent for little Louis XV. He was at his wits' end to know where to find money, when a clever Scots adventurer named John Law came to him with a new and splendid idea. This was to use paper money instead of gold and silver. The regent was greatly taken with the idea, and he gave Law leave to issue the paper money. It was quite a good idea had it been kept within bounds, but it was not kept within bounds. All France went mad with eagerness to get some of the paper money which was, they thought, going to make them rich forever. Besides issuing paper money, Law started what was known as the Mississippi Scheme, or Company of the Indies, in 1717. Louisiana, which had been received back from Crozat, was handed over to John Law, who undertook to settle the country and work the gold and silver mines which were supposed to be there. Law began at once to fill all France with stories of Louisiana and its delights. Gold and silver mines, he said, had been discovered there which were so rich that they could never be used up. Lumps of gold lay about everywhere, and one might have them for the picking up. As for silver, it was so common that it had little value, except to be used for paving the streets. In proof of these stories, lumps of gold, said to have come from Louisiana, were shown in the shops of Paris. As to the climate, it was the most perfect on earth. It was never too hot and never too cold, but always warm and sunny. The soil was so fertile that one had but to scratch it to produce the finest crops. Delicious fruits grew everywhere, and might be gathered all the year round. The meadows were made beautiful, and the air scented with the loveliest of flowers. In fact, Louisiana was painted as an earthly paradise, where nothing the heart could desire was lacking. People believed these stories, and believing them, it was not wonderful that they desired to possess for themselves some of these delights. So rich and poor, high and low, rushed to buy shares in the company. The street in Paris where the offices of the company were was choked from end to end with a struggling crowd. The rich brought their hundreds, the poor their scanty savings. Great lords and ladies sold their lands and houses in order to have money to buy more shares. The poor went ragged and hungry in order to scrape together a few pence. Peers and merchants, soldiers, priests, fine ladies, servants, statesmen, labourers, all jostled together and fought to buy the magic paper, which would make them rich and happy beyond belief. Fortunes were made and lost in a day. Some who had been rich found themselves penniless. Others who had always lived in poverty found themselves suddenly rolling in wealth which they did not know how to use. And John Law was the wizard whose magic wand had created all these riches. He was flattered and courted by everyone. The greatest princes in the land came to beg favours of him. They came to him to beg, and he treated them haughtily as beggars, and bade them wait. Day by day, and month by month, the madness increased, and the gigantic bubble grew larger and larger. Bienville, meanwhile, who had been deprived of his governorship, was once more made governor of Louisiana. With a company of settlers he returned again to the colony in 1718, and he at once set about building a capital, which, in honour of the regent, he called New Orleans. The place he chose for a capital was covered with forest. So before any building could be done, 50 men were set to fell the trees and clear a space. And then the first foundations of the new great city of New Orleans were laid. But still the colony did not prosper, for the colonists were for the most part rogues and vagabonds, sent there by force, and kept there equally by force. They looked upon Louisiana as a prison, and tried constantly to escape from it. Meanwhile no ships laden with gold and gems reached France, for no gold mines had ever been discovered. Then people began to grow tired of waiting. Some of them began to suspect that all the stories of the splendours of Louisiana were not true, and they tried to sell their paper money and paper shares, and get back the gold which they had given for them. Soon every one wanted to sell, and no one wanted to buy. The value of the paper money fell and fell, until it was worth less than nothing. People who had thought themselves millionaires found themselves beggars. Law, who had been flattered and courted, was now hated and cursed. And in terror of his life he fled from France in 1790, to die miserably in Italy a few years later.